Ever feel like you're just kind of, stuck on autopilot, like going through the motions, but missing that connection with something bigger?
Yeah, that sense of drifting, it's something a lot of people experience.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today, spiritual direction. Like, what is it? How does it work? Hopefully, by the end of this deep dive, we'll have a better sense of how it can help us reconnect with what truly matters.
And to be clear, right from the start, we're not talking about therapy or counseling.
Right? It's not about getting advice or someone telling you what to do.
Yeah, it's definitely not that. Think of it more as hmm, a sacred space to explore your own relationship with God, without any judgment.
Okay, no quick fixes. I like it. But how does this actually play out? What happens in a spiritual direction session? Our first source, 8 Steps for Spiritual Direction Sessions, walks us through it.
And the author really emphasizes creating this warm, empathetic atmosphere. It's about making it a safe haven for vulnerability.
So it's not just like spilling your guts to a random stranger. It's about really feeling heard.
Yes, exactly. And getting specific, like the author talks about asking focused questions, like, can you give me an example of something that's been troubling you
Hmm.
lately? It's about diving into those personal struggles, which often reveal these universal truths that we all share.
It's interesting you say that because this is what really stood out to me too. He talks about engaged emotions,
Mm.
and it's almost like the director is helping you articulate feelings that you didn't even know you had.
It's true. Sometimes we don't even have the words for what we're feeling, right?
Right. I used to think that silence during prayer was just about, clearing my head, but now I'm starting to see it as making space for something bigger.
It is about making space. Like, imagine your director helping you put a name to a feeling you couldn't quite grasp before. Like maybe you've been carrying around this, I don't know, this subtle ache beneath your anxiety, but they could help you untack that and perhaps even reveal a deeper spiritual longing or need underneath.
Okay, that's powerful. But I got to be honest, the silence thing, that can be a little awkward. Like how long are you supposed to just sit there?
Oh, absolutely. It's a common reaction. But Cultivate Silent Pauses actually talks about this. Silence in this context, it can be incredibly powerful.
So you're saying it's not just about enduring the silence.
Not at all. It's about moving from enduring it to actually craving it. Think of it as listening, not just with your ears, but with your whole self, for those whispers of God, in your heart, in nature, in your doubts. They call it holy listening.
Holy listening. I like that. So it's not just me rambling at God hoping something sticks.
It's a two-way street. It's about cultivating the sense of sacred attentiveness to both your inner world and the divine.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. But what's the bigger picture here? What's the overall goal of all these steps we keep talking about?
Well, soul shepherding approach to spiritual direction describes it as fostering holy listening and connecting with the divine. It's about recognizing that the Holy Spirit is the real director.
Wow, that's an interesting concept. The Holy Spirit as the real director. I think that's something that a lot of people will find really intriguing.
It is. It's like seeking guidance and wisdom from something beyond ourselves. It's about that alignment.
And maybe that explains why a lot of our sources emphasize that this isn't just about the spiritual realm. They also highlight the integration of spiritual and psychological development, like recognizing that our emotional well-being is completely intertwined with our spiritual growth.
Absolutely. They're not separate, are they? We're
Well,
talking about nurturing the whole person, right?
right, exactly.
Right.
Because let's be real, we can't just compartmentalize our emotions and spirituality. They're always influencing each other.
Exactly.
So we've talked about what spiritual direction is and why it matters, but now let's get practical. What goes on in a spiritual direction session and questions for use during an initial SD session offer some great advice on just that.
They're great resources, especially because I think the logistics can feel like a barrier for some people.
Totally.
Yeah.
How often do you meet? How much does it cost? What do you even talk about in that very first session? Like, these are all valid questions.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And Bill Gaultiere, he really tackles these head on in his piece. He talks about the importance of that initial session, establishing a rapport, discussing those practicalities. It's also about making sure it's a good fit. You need to connect with this person, trust them to hold that sacred space for you.
And he also mentioned this whole idea of the third chair, which initially made me think of like bringing an actual chair to the session.
Gently.
But it's so much deeper than that.
Oh, yeah, much deeper. It's not about the furniture. The third chair It symbolizes the divine presence, a tangible way to invite that sacredness into the room, even if it's a virtual room.
Which is so relevant these days. So much is happening online. It really highlights the intentionality of spiritual direction. It's not like a casual chat over coffee.
No, not at all.
It's about showing up with reverence and openness and a willingness to connect with something, bigger than
It's
ourselves.
a beautiful thing. In a world that's constantly demanding our attention, just the act of dedicating time and space for this kind of connection, it's radical.
I love that. Okay, so we've established that spiritual direction is a journey, not a quick fix. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that even when we don't see those immediate results, the simple act of showing up, of engaging in the process, it's valuable. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. It's like tending a garden. You might not see blossoms overnight, right? But the consistent watering, the weeding, the nurturing, it creates the conditions for growth. And sometimes, honestly, just showing up, even when we don't feel like it, is a victory in itself.
And who knows what might bloom from that dedication, right?
Exactly. It's a journey of self-discovery and discovering that the divine presence that's often closer than we realize.
It makes me think of that saying, something like, the answers we seek are often within us. And a good spiritual director can help us uncover those, right? It's not so much about them giving us the answers, but teaching us how to find them within ourselves.
Yeah, it's a partnership, isn't it, between you, the director, and, ultimately that divine presence guiding you both. And it's not always about those big aha moments. Sometimes it's those subtle shifts, those quiet moments of grace that we might otherwise miss.
And that reminds me of something Dave Ramoldi emphasizes in his questions for that first session. Spiritual direction isn't about getting the right answers or having someone tell you what to do. It's about you deepening your own understanding of God, your own relationship. Honestly, I sometimes catch myself worrying that I'm, doing it all wrong.
Oh, tell me about it.
Maybe my prayer life isn't what it should be. Or, I don't know, maybe I'm just not connecting as deeply as other people. It's easy to get stuck in those comparisons.
It is. But remember, spiritual direction is about meeting you where you are, right here, right now. Those feelings you're talking about, the inadequacy, the doubt, they're all part of it too.
So even when it's messy, even when we don't have it all figured out, that's okay.
Exactly. It's in those moments of vulnerability when we allow ourselves to be truly seen that real transformation can happen. Like what goes on in a spiritual direction session talks about the director gently guiding you back to yourself, your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. It's about approaching those parts of ourselves with curiosity and compassion, even when they feel a little uncomfortable.
It's like taking inventory of our spiritual toolbox, what are the things that have helped us connect in the past? What are those practices, those experiences that we might want to cultivate more of in our lives today?
Exactly. It's about recognizing those sources of strength and inspiration that we can then draw on in those times of need, which kind of leads to an interesting question. What are the questions, big or small, that you're grappling with on your spiritual journey?
Okay, so picture this. You're sitting across from a spiritual director, maybe feeling a little nervous, a little hopeful. What are some of the questions they might ask to help guide you on that journey?
Well, according to Dave Ramoldi, a good starting point might be what brings you to spiritual direction at this point in your life, just to kind of clarify your intentions from the beginning.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Setting the stage.
Right. They might also ask about your current relationship with God and, what you hope it to become. It's about understanding your starting point and your desired destination, spiritually speaking.
And I imagine prayer would be a big part of that conversation. What does your prayer life look like? Has it changed or evolved over time?
Absolutely. Prayer, it's often seen as that gateway to a deeper spiritual connection, right? So exploring your own experiences with prayer, it can be incredibly insightful. In fact, Dave even asks about things like silence or biblical meditation, recognizing that these practices, they can be a little intimidating for some, but also, incredibly enriching.
He's really acknowledging that we all come to this with different experiences, different comfort levels. It's not about being perfect. It's about being open.
Exactly. And one more thing he asks about that I find really powerful. He asks people to recall a time when they felt a really strong sense of consolation in their relationship with God.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's about recognizing those moments where you felt truly connected to your spiritual core, those moments of, peace or clarity or joy.
It's like taking a spiritual inventory, huh?
Yeah.
Remembering those times when it just clicked,
Yeah.
and figuring out how to tap back into that. But what about when you hit a wall? Like when you're struggling with something and the answer just isn't clear?
That's where the whole no advice giving thing is so important. Remember, your director isn't there to give you a solution.
Right. It's not about them fixing it for you.
Exactly. It's about helping you uncover your own truth.
So more guidance than answers. They're not like trying to control your spiritual life or anything.
Not at all. It's more like, think of it like having a hiking buddy, someone who's walked the path before. They can point out different routes, help you read the map, but ultimately you're the one choosing the direction.
Okay, so let's say that first meeting goes well. You're feeling good about this whole spiritual direction thing. You're ready to, really dive in. What does that actually look like? What happens next?
Well, unlike weekly therapy, Bill Gaultier suggests meeting every 3 or 4 weeks.
Oh, interesting. So less frequent.
Yeah, it's not about fitting everything into an hour. It's about letting things simmer, giving you time to really process what you've discussed.
Yeah, that makes sense to integrate it into your life.
Yeah.
But what about the sessions themselves? What actually happens?
Well, they often start with a prayer or a moment of silence just to kind of center yourselves, create that sacred space.
Grounded.
Exactly. And from there, it's really your journey to direct. What's on your heart? What are you struggling with? What experiences, good or bad, have come up since you last met?
It's like a check-in, but on a deeper level, right?
Yes, like a spiritual check-in with a trusted friend, someone who's there to listen without judgment, offer support, maybe a fresh perspective.
And who's not going to try to fix you?
Exactly. They're not there to fix you. They're there to help you deepen your connection with God, tap into that inner wisdom you already have, and, just navigate life with more purpose.
It's interesting because sometimes it seems like just that act of showing up consistently for yourself, making that time and space for your own spiritual well-being, that in itself can be so powerful.
Absolutely. It's about tending to your own spiritual garden, nurturing that connection so that you can then share those fruits with the world.
That's beautiful. And as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into spiritual direction, I keep coming back to this one idea from that healing prayer we talked about. It's the idea that, when we invest in our own well-being spiritually, we actually become better equipped to offer healing and support to others.
It's like a ripple effect. As we cultivate more peace, more love, more wisdom within ourselves, it naturally flows outward, right? Touching the lives of those around us.
I love that. So it's not just about us, it's about recognizing our interconnectedness, how we can show up for each other, for the world. And on that note, as you reflect on everything we've talked about today, ask yourself, what is it about your relationship with God that you're really curious to explore, in a safe and supportive space? And how might that journey of self-discovery empower you to be a source of healing, a source of inspiration in your own life and in the world? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.